Hello, my beautiful friends. Welcome to Proper Madness. My name is Sabby, and I give a unique perspective on mental health by providing tools, guidance, and knowledge on how we can better understand ourselves, as well as our past and present experiences, and in doing so, we can help heal our mental health. I get to speak with a variety of individuals from around the world as they share their stories from their journey through their mental wellness so that it helps others stand strong and use their voice. Welcome back, everyone, to Proper Madness. Today, I'm honored to have Amy Fiedler on my podcast. I was just telling her before we started, I've had my eye on having her on for a long time. So I'm very excited about this episode. And I'll let her take the wheel and introduce herself to you.
Hi, everyone. I'm so happy to be here and talk about, I believe we're going to talk about developing secure relationships and just what healthy interactions look like, especially after you've been through any type of toxic, abusive relationship. I've been doing this line of work as a holistic life coach and a trauma support specialist for well over 10 plus years at this point. Didn't plan this route for myself, but ended up here and feel very connected to the work I do. And I get to work with men, women, children, all ages, all genders, all over the world. And we really just work through emotional trauma, psychological trauma, trying to develop a sense of understanding and safety and trust, rebuild self-esteem, self-confidence, self-love, help their marriages and their relationships. I mean, the work just really ripples out in so many different ways.
Yeah, because relationships basically surround our lives, right?
Oh, God, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's no surprise to me, though, that you help that many people in that many different like age brackets, gender, doesn't matter. It's just because everyone deals with their own shit and needs help kind of figuring out how to navigate a healthy dynamic after trauma.
Yeah, it's crazy because I'll get somebody who is a mother of 2 children and she starts working with me, and then suddenly, because she is modeling this to her kids, now her kids want someone to talk to, and they're like, they know Amy. So they're like, can we talk to Amy? Can we have a session with Amy? And the same with people who are in relationships. Often one partner comes to me, and that's kind of how I work. I'm usually like, I'm not taking on a couple straight off the bat, but if one half of that couple works with me for a period of time, I will welcome in the partner, and it turns into kind of couple sessions. So yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, the youngest I've worked with is like age 5, and the oldest I've worked with is age 80.
Wow.
Yes, 80.
It doesn't matter how old you are, you can still work on your relationships and
absolutely.
That's awesome. That's really cool. So you said that this wasn't your plan. What was your plan before all this happened?
Yeah, see, I told you my story would be sprinkled throughout what we're talking about. I graduated college focusing on photography.
Oh, wow.
And then I went, because I grew up in New Jersey. So when I moved back home from college, I started doing fashion stuff, like wardrobe styling in New York. And I really thought that was going to be my career path. I'd really loved fashion. I got to work on all these different photo shoots, music videos. I worked around a lot of celebrities, and it was an interesting world, but I wasn't personally happy, and that didn't really fulfill me. So I had struggled with my own emotional issues since I was like a teenager. And one day I just was like, I'm tired of commuting. I was driving an hour and a half at like 5 a.m., working until 2 a.m., sleeping for like an hour, doing the same thing the next day. And then if you say no, because there's a blizzard outside, they go, we'll find someone else who's closer, and we'll say yes. So yeah, so it's just a high stress position. And when you're already struggling and you're already unhappy, to have that added weight, it just wasn't working for me. So I took some time and wanted to figure out what would make me happy. And I ended up here.
Oh, wow. What the heck? Yeah. So you just okay, explain to me how that happened? Did you just took an interest in like relationships and how that was working, or is it from your own experience of something you went through?
Yeah, a little bit of that.
Yeah.
Honestly, relationships was always at the forefront of like what I was struggling with.
Yeah.
I had a volatile relationship with my parents from a young age. And then, I was like, when I went boy crazy in my teenage years, none of those really worked out well. And it really was just a constant hit to my self-esteem and my self-worth, which
Yeah.
I really didn't have any growing up the way I grew up. So yeah, it was this all encompassing, like that was always hanging over my head. And that was what I sought after therapy for, in addition to like anxiety and things. But truly what I did was I was just like, I don't know what makes me happy. So I sat down. It's so corny when I tell people this, they're like, what? I'm like, yeah, I swear this is what I did. I took a notebook and I just started writing anything I could think of that brought me joy.
Uh,
And it, like, if someone else read it, it wouldn't make sense to them. I was
yeah.
like going to the beach, like random shit all over the place, not
Yeah.
career focused, just what makes me happy and what feels like Amy.
Hmm.
And what kept coming up in what I was writing was I love helping people.
Hmm.
And people come to me, no matter how much I struggled, people were always asking my advice. They always relied on me to like, they confided in me. They wanted my advice on things. And I was like, I wonder what I could do without having to like go back to college and
Yeah.
actually like become a licensed therapist, because that just didn't feel right to me.
Hmm.
And I genuinely, again, corny, thought that I made up the profession of life coaching. I'm not trying to be arrogant, but I didn't know that
Yeah.
life coaches was a thing. And I just was like, well, I wonder if I could like help people and not have to be a licensed therapist. And
Hmm.
then I started Googling. So when people are like, how did you get into this? And like, how did you find out how to get certified? I get a little frustrated because I'm literally like, nobody taught
Do
me.
you know how many times people have asked me similar questions, like, how do you know how to do X, Y, and Z? Like, well, if you want to learn how to do something and you want to change your life, you figure out a way to do it. You know what I mean? Like
A
you
hundred
kind of,
percent.
yeah, like if you want to make, like anyone who wants to change, you have to do something. So that's like sounds exactly like what you were doing. You're like, no, I want to change. I'm literally miserable. So what can I do? Yeah,
Yeah.
I
You got
resonate
to
with
get out
that.
of your
Yeah.
own way, and I think like, I mean, this is kind of snowballing into a different direction, but I look at people nowadays who grow up with the internet and with social media.
Mm,
And, I respect it because I think it's a great resource and a tool in so many ways to connect with people all over the place.
yeah.
But they're so used to having everything at their fingertips
Yes.
that they're, I mean, emotionally stunted in certain ways. They're not willing to like click a link,
Mm,
read a website, do a Google search, do their due diligence. Like they won't be proactive. They
yeah.
just want
Now.
everything handed. Yes,
Yeah.
now.
Yeah. No, my God, you're preaching to the choir. No, I have that exact same struggle, I think, with witnessing like because myself, the way that I have overcome much of my trauma was literally by wanting to do it. Because eventually you hit bottom in any respect, and you kind of have two choices. You're like, all right, I can stay here and just play victim and like let life happen to me, or I can figure out a way to climb out of it and just change the trajectory and move forward and learn and grow. But like you said, a lot of people don't do that. They just kind of they stay in the what I like to call like the victim mode or like the easy button mindset where it's like, no, there should be a quick fix for everything. There is not. There really
There
is.
is
Yeah.
not. I mean, yeah, but you're right. And that's a good way to put it. Like the easy button. It's like,
Yeah.
it's those paths that they've carved out already, those neural pathways. They're just defaulting to the same path over and over and over and over again. And you're kind of like, if you want a different outcome, you got to kind of do something different
Yes.
and get out of your own way. And more times than not, that's really the biggest issue is
Mhm.
we get in our own way from doing the things that we want to do. And we could come up with a million things to blame and excuses to
Yes.
make, but it's really us against us.
I love the videos and the reels and your podcast and everything because you're so direct, right? You don't hold back. You're like, no, hey, if this is what you want, this is how it is, and this is how you get through it. And I think that's the best way that you should be and can be, because I think in today's society, everyone's like dancing around things, and it's like, no, you kind of have to just kind of get to the point sometimes and tell people, no, like, wake up. Like you posted a reel. I just saw it, I think yesterday. I don't know why it just came up yesterday, but it was because there's something going around the internet where if someone feels like home to you, that they're safe. And
Mm,
the way you explained that that's not necessarily true if you've been through a lot of trauma
yeah.
was, oh my God, that was so key. It's like, oh no, actually take a step back. How was your home growing up? You know?
Yeah, we don't think, I mean, and I think that's the other thing. I really get on my soapbox about this because online, I think a lot of people focus their content on what is going to get them the click and the like and the
Yeah.
engagement. And what gets that is that cut and dry, black and white thinking.
Mm.
So they want to make these big binary statements of like, this is the best thing you can do. You need to do this. This
Mm.
is a red flag. And I'm like, I get it. You're getting high
Yeah.
numbers, but you're not really helping people. And
Yeah.
there's a way to deliver that same information as direct, adding context, adding nuance, giving them some understanding of what they actually need to figure out and connect to inside of themselves,
Yeah.
instead of just like blindly following the leader. Oh,
Ugh.
well, so and so told me that's a red flag, so I guess that's a red flag. And you're kind of like,
Right?
their red flag is not your red flag. Like you're just
Oh
not
my
you.
gosh, yeah. That was me on I swear I was on TikTok the other day and I was like, they all these things come up of red flags in men, and I'm like, half of this doesn't make sense to me. I saw like a really ridiculous one. I mean, there's one that still is going around as if they wanted to, they would. And that one,
Oh, I hate
thank
that.
you. I'm like, what the absolute hell is happening right now? I'm like, this is taken out of context in so many ways. So now it holds people in relationships or dating to unrealistically high standards, which
Yeah.
don't make sense to me. And then you're not even communicating. It's like they're throwing all these red flags to people that you're like dating, currently dating, maybe not like early stages talking, but even still I'm like, oh my God, what happened to communicating and like asking questions? Like maybe, I don't know, like ask for clarification. Like if something's confusing you, it's okay to ask. And then
Yeah,
you have
totally.
the feminine and masculine energy thing that's happening right now, which is like, if you want to be in your feminine, you can't be direct and ask. I'm like, what? It sounds torturous. Why won't you do it?
Oh,
It's
you
so bad.
I can't pay too much attention to
Yeah.
everything because it riles me up. And like I said earlier,
Yeah.
like I do well when I'm prompted, but I also, if I'm prompted, you'll get me charged up and I will just get on a tangent. And
No,
some
you
of
should.
that
You
stuff,
can.
I mean, I should, right? Yeah. It drives you nuts because
Yeah.
I used to say a really long time ago when I got started that I felt like the janitor.
Mm.
Like I felt like the people that were coming to work with me had gone and worked, and it's still this way to a degree, but in the past it was like they had gone to all these therapists, all these life coaches, gotten all confused, then they
Yeah.
come to me and I help them clean it all up, and then they're like, oh my God, everything changed, this is so great. And I'm like, I'm so glad, but also this is exhausting. Why are all
Yeah.
these people fucking you up? Like, and so now it's like I get a lot of people that have been in years of therapy and have been helped. Like, and that's one of the things that I ask them if they're applying to work with me privately. I
Yeah.
say, like, have you gone to therapy? How was your experience? Because I'm trying to get to know the person, just through a couple questions and answers. And if they're like, oh, I had a great experience, I learned this, but I'm needing more, and
Mm.
I believe you can give me that more, I'm like, yes, then that's the right reasons to
Yeah.
come to me. But yeah, they've been through years of therapy and they come to me and they go, you're telling me stuff that my therapist never explained to me.
Ugh.
And I'm like, that's wild to hear
Yeah.
over and over again, mainly because, like I said earlier, when I got started, I was like, I could go back to school and be a licensed therapist. I really don't want to. I didn't feel drawn to. But I fought for years people online telling me that I didn't have the qualifications and that like everything I said was BS and nobody really wanted to listen. I mean, there was people listening, but I was also getting a lot of pushback from people going, who do you think you are? You're not a therapist. And now therapists hire me.
Yeah. That's what I was about to say. I was like, yeah, now it's like a different day and age, right? Because life coaches and coaches generally only became more normalized and accepted, I think maybe in the last like 2-3 years.
Yes.
I feel like 3 is reaching like 2 years. So even when I went down that same thought process, my grandmother was like, you should go back to school and like be a psychologist. Like, no, you can be a coach and you can help people without needing to do all that. But that's the interesting part is like I have been to therapy for years and years for like PTSD and all the things. And so like there was a point in time where I was with my therapist and I went, you are letting me manipulate you into thinking that this person that I'm dating is a great person, and I know subconsciously they're not a great person, and I need you to call me out of my bullshit. And they can't, right? Because sometimes like if you've known the same therapist for a long time, I've never had a therapist that's like outrightly just been like, hey, this is where you're at fault, and I wanted something like that. So then I hired a coach. I was like, no, it's like I need someone to kind of call me out on my stuff. I need someone to kind of hold me accountable. So I think what you're doing is great, right? Because like,
thank you.
Yeah, with the relationships, you need that. You need some real perspective, especially if you've been through trauma.
Totally.
Yeah. So I had a question that like popped into my brain, and it's a broad question, but you can answer it however you feel. In terms of like how can we learn to be in more secure relationships? What are like some basics that people can just go off of? I know it's case by case because everyone's trauma is different, but if you could give like a gist.
Of course.
Yeah.
Well, where I start everybody, and I'm sure you've heard me probably regurgitate this countless times, but you have to identify what you value first and foremost, especially if you've been through any level of toxic, abusive, manipulative type of relationships.
Yeah.
You have to sit down with yourself and say, how do I like being spoken to? How do I like being treated? What makes me feel safe? And quite frankly, if you've been through trauma, answering those questions is extremely hard because a lot of us, I've clearly been there. A lot of us can't identify what we want because we've suppressed it, we've avoided, we've just, neglected it, abandoned it so long. So what I always encourage is sit down and look at everything you hate first. Make a list of all of the behavior, all of the types of communication styles that you've ever experienced that does not make you feel good. And write it out. Write it out to the degree that it's so specific that it identifies what it does to you mentally, emotionally, physically when you're exposed to it.
Yeah.
And if you have that full picture of when I am exposed to this is what I feel, and then this is what I want to do, or this is what I want to say, or this is how I behave, this is how I cope, then you make a list off of that. You make the opposite list, right? So then you can identify much easier, okay, so if I don't like this is clearly what I value and respect. This is what is going to make me feel safe.
Yeah.
And then that list, those are your boundaries. So if you start there, those are your red flags. And then you make the list on the other side. Those are your green flags. And you uphold those green flags. You communicate those green flags, right? So in other words, you're looking for that treatment, but you're also advocating for that treatment.
Yes.
And that's what I mean when I say you got to communicate them, but you also have to follow through. When you say you want something, and they give you the opposite. You don't just stand there and tolerate getting the opposite.
Yeah.
And that's where a lot of people get stuck in transitioning from feeling unsafe and insecure to developing a secure like connection and attachment to someone, is they don't know that they need to follow through and respect themselves first and foremost. And if they do that, and that's where a lot of my own clients get stuck. They know what they're doing, they know what they don't like they could map it all out for you, and you're like, why are you putting up with it?
Why do you think people put up with it? That's what I was going to ask you. Why do you think people kind of stick around and go, maybe I'll wait and see if it changes if I don't, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's different for everyone. Speaking on behalf of myself, I know when I was in those situations, I tolerated it because I didn't feel worth getting different. So I thought your say was the final say. So, and that was the dynamic in my childhood.
Yeah.
Like mom and dad call the shots. So I spoke up a lot as a kid. Like I wasn't like lacking the ability to self-advocate. I just was shut down every time. So yeah, I took that into every romantic relationship I had. I'd speak up, they'd laugh in my face, or they'd tell me no, or they'd do something, and I immediately shut down. So I didn't know that was my pattern until I went through repeated toxic relationships and had enough and was like, well, we got to do something different, girl, because this ain't working. And then you figure it out. But like other people, they excuse the behavior. So, I'll say to people, I'm explaining the behavior, I'm not excusing it. So I'll help you understand why someone's acting that way, where it stems from, what they're struggling with, what they need to work on. I could just map that out for you real easily, but that doesn't mean it's okay.
Yeah.
And I think that's another place people get stuck, is they go, well, he's waiting for therapy. Well, his parents do this to him. Well, or her or whoever.
Yeah.
And you're kind of like, okay, those are all facts. And like, it's a fact you're hurt too. And that's harmful to you.
Yeah. No, that's very, very true. Wow, you're having me reflect on some things currently.
That happens.
Yeah, well, it's a good thing. No, it's a good thing. I think the biggest struggle that I have, so I too, I think a lot of my listeners know a little bit more about my relationship background, but just like a synopsis for you, and I probably won't put this in so that it gives context. But I've been in holy man moly, 4 or 5 very toxic relationships. 2 were with textbook narcissists, like clinically diagnosed. And then 1 was with someone who was highly, highly, highly codependent, like wouldn't leave me alone. So I always had extremes in my relationships. There was never stability. And growing up, both my parents, very extreme. There are a lot of high highs, a lot of low lows. There was never like a middle point. And anytime anything was like happy or great, something would happen. And then like the whole like shit would just hit the fan. And my relationships reflected that. Anytime that there was stability or some form of like normalcy or like happiness in some way, either my partner or me, like something would happen. It went both ways. Like either I'd self-sabotage or do something.
Yeah.
Or they would act erratically in some way, shape, or form, or like shut down. Ghosting. I've been in relationships where people just fully ghost you while you're in a relationship. It's like the worst. That's like my biggest thing. That's something that I think I still talk to people who still deal with that, or they're in a relationship or they're dating someone and you're talking, whatever. And these people just disappear for like 2-3 days a week, 2 weeks. And then they come back with no explanation. And you're going, cool. And then your anxious attachment just gets triggered and you're going, what the, like, and you start acting not like yourself, right? Your attachments start acting in a way that is not secure.
You probably now get triggered, or have you worked through that? Do you get triggered when things are going calm?
Yes. And I'm like, it's almost like I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. all the time. Like I'm sitting there going, okay, what's the catch? Or I'm like
Yep.
waiting to get rejected or waiting.
Ghosting is traumatizing because ghosting is highly abusive, and
It
people don't
is.
realize that, because often people who ghost will be like, well, I get nervous communicating, or
Mhm.
like things like I have a lot of anxiety, so I just can't talk to people sometimes, or I got really
Yeah.
depressed. And although, and this is where, like in trauma healing, I always emphasize this, and is so important. Your next move is to distance yourself. And
Yeah.
so you stop engaging, you go silent, whatever. People tend to fuse them together. And I'm like, no, 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 no. They're very different.
Yeah.
Ghosting, there is absolutely no communication at all. And that's what makes it so incredibly traumatizing for the other person, because had they just known you need some space
Yes.
and been given the opportunity, and this is what I always say talking about boundaries, you have to give people a chance to respect you.
Mm.
And if you aren't willing to even communicate, you're not willing to give them the chance to even try to respect you. So if you want respect, you're never going to get it if you're not going to speak up for yourself,
Yeah.
because
Well, communication's key, and I think a lot of people neglect that, right? Like still, which is interesting. I think maybe like they don't feel like they can express themselves for whatever reason, but at the same time, it's like if you're thinking and feeling a certain way, it's better to verbalize it on both ends. Like whether you're not interested or whether you need your boundaries met, than to just continue and sit there and be silent. I think like that's what I dislike right now about what's the trend on social media of like the masculine and feminine energy stuff of if you're a woman, you have to sit back and let the man chase you, even if they're acting like they're not interested in you, which is, I mean, like again, it's like perpetuating almost like these mind games, but then at the same time, like to what you're saying, it's, and from like some of your knowledge, it's like that's just more traumatic and kind of, bringing up more shit for both people probably. I don't, you know what I mean?
it's also just like, it's not teaching anyone how to have a healthy, safe, supportive, sustainable relationship. I
Yeah.
got tagged the other day. Someone kept tagging me in somebody else's like TikToks. And and I mean, they were like angry commenting at that creator of the
Yeah.
TikTok, and then going, "Hey guys, if you want real help, follow follow Amy the life coach." And I was literally like, well, thank you. Like, I'm not really over here, guys. But the videos were all framed around stuff like that. It was
Yeah.
talking about dating, and it was saying like, if you're talking to someone, you being too needy or you wanting too much attention is going to like repel people. And I'm like, first of all, that's lacking so much context, because
Yes.
throwing the word needy around, like it's just harmful, because the truth is that we all have needs.
Mm.
That's a fact. In relationships, in dating, we have these needs, and that's part of dating, is learning each other's needs, understanding if each other can meet those needs the way we need them met, and then figuring out where someone falls short. If we're willing to compromise, meet them in the middle, or it's like a hell no,
Yeah.
you're nowhere near what I need, and let's just go our separate ways. And this person was basically like, don't be too needy, don't text them all the time. And I was like, what is this? Like
Yeah.
12-year-old advice? Like what kind of like encouragement is this giving people? You're telling people not to be themselves,
Mm.
not communicate honestly, openly, transparently, not do all of these things that are important to do in relationships. I'm just like
Just roll
pretending
with
I've had too much to drink sometimes when I'm looking at you. Like, oh, okay,
it.
screen's going a little blurry here.
That's fine. Just roll with it. This is one of the most interesting podcasts I've ever done.
I mean, it's
Okay.
very possible that I've like called in the spirits to your room, and now they're all just messing with your
It's,
equipment.
you know what? Maybe because my walls are black, maybe they're like, oh, are we home here? She's got like a goth vibe. I don't know.
We feel safe here. Yeah.
We feel
This
safe.
actually feels like home. We're going to stick around, Sabby.
This actually feels like home. But the one thing I think I really want to talk about is that at home thing, right? Where why is it when we meet someone and they feel like home to us, but they don't treat us how we'd like them to, or getting our needs met? That could be a reason why we stick around too. But the way that you explained it was so well. So if you want to explain it to my listeners.
Sure.
Yeah.
So everybody says that, you want to find a person or lean into a relationship that feels like home. But if home for you wasn't healthy, if home for you was toxic, if home for you was abusive, if home for you was manipulative, then that is the home that you're going to lean into, because that is the familiar feeling that you have long come to know and know how to function with. And I think that's what people don't realize is it's not always, a lot of people say on that same topic, trust your gut.
Yeah.
And that's great advice, but also, again, lacking so much context, because as someone who myself is a trauma survivor, I don't listen to my gut at all, to be honest with you, because my gut tells me to be anxious in safe environments. My gut tells me to feel paranoid and threatened when there is absolutely no reason, because I am traumatized. So until I get enough consistency in a certain area of my life, that is what starts to regulate me and familiarize. I never say that word right. You get it. Familiarize myself with that person or that situation and their interactions or their reactions and responses. Like my partner and myself, we just had our 2-year anniversary the other day. And I just got to a point in certain ways in our relationship where I'm like, now I know exactly how you're going to react and respond to this, to this, to this. That takes time.
Yeah.
So when you're like dating and you hear things like lean into what feels like home, the first thing you should do is like examine what home felt like for you.
Yes.
And not just felt like, but like identify how you were treated and what you liked and what you didn't, because some people get stuck in the, well, it wasn't so bad. You're like, and I tell people this whenever someone comes to me and they're like, I don't know, Amy, I had the best childhood. So why do I keep ending up in toxic relationships? And I go, okay, because you've been misinformed. Like, it doesn't mean that your parents abused you, but it can mean you got bullied at school. It can mean that you had a babysitter that was neglectful and you spent more time with that babysitter than you did mom and dad because they were working full time. Yes. Maybe in some ways, like my parents, I mean, there was screaming and yelling, there was like verbal threats, there were things like that, but there was also, they were there. They brought us to our activities. They provided us whatever we wanted. Some might say I was spoiled, but I didn't have undivided attention from my mom. And that's what I wanted. So when she got home from work, she worked at a hospital. She had a high stress position all day. She came home. She was determined to cook everybody dinner. She'd pour herself a glass of wine. She'd start to help me with homework. The phone rang. She went in the other room and she never came back. And guess how a kid feels? Well, forgotten. Yeah. And then have that repeated experience. And guess what feels like home for Amy? When people forget me. So what do I lean into? People who are too busy to make time for me when I get to be an adult. And I had to learn first, well, mom didn't do that to me. Mom did that because mom lacked boundaries. So I had to like untangle myself from mom's behavior being about me, because when we identify with it, then we literally go through life feeling like this is who I am. Everybody forgets Amy. And then what happens? I go into every relationship that feels a little familiar, and I reinforce that belief over and over and over again.
Yeah, you explained that so well. It's kind of untangling our beliefs, right? It's like,
Yeah.
if we don't work to do that, we don't work to even just try to take a look at our upbringing in our childhood, no matter how great it looked. I mean, unless you had like awesome parents that were very emotionally available.
Yeah.
But still, I think like everyone goes through something, and there's still so many people who to this day are like, I had a great childhood, and then you start hearing about how they grew up, and you're like, whoa, wait a second. Like, you're also a child of divorce and you're not
Facts.
pleased.
Yeah.
Like, what? I'm like, no, that doesn't.
You're like, oh, wait, yeah, you were 4. Oh, okay, that
Yeah,
worked out for you well. You're good. Like, yeah, you got past that
you're
without any
cool.
harm. Okay.
Yeah, I'm like, oh wait, you have deep-seated commitment issues, huh? That's interesting. So I've started like picking apart the people that I date. I will literally try to get to know them so well that I know what happened in their childhood. Because I'm like, no, I need to know what happened to you. I need to know what I need to know. Because if I don't know, then I'm not gonna know. Like, also, have you ever been to therapy? Because if you've never been to therapy, ugh, if you've never done any work on yourself, it's like all these things, right? If no one's actively working on themselves to be in a healthy spot mentally and emotionally, there's no way in hell you're gonna be able to show up correctly in any dynamic, right?
Dating wasn't fun for me. Like, I empathize.
Fun for me, let me tell
Yeah,
you.
it wasn't fun. And I had
Yeah.
refused for years to like get on a dating app. And when I finally did, it was right before my dog died.
Oh man.
Yeah, so I started dating, my dog dropped dead, then COVID hit, and I was like, well, I gotta grieve, and I can't stay in my home alone without my dog anymore by myself. So yeah, I'll meet all these people and I'll go on these dates, and that's what I did, and it was hell. And I was just like, this is not a healthy way to cope, number one. Number two, through all of those experiences, I learned, and I'm sure you realize because you're doing it over time, you just start to fine tune how you go about it.
Yeah.
I went from like saying yes to everybody because my mindset was like, sure, I'll get a dinner with you. Sure, I'll get drinks. Like, what's the harm? To then going, you know what? No, you're going to talk to me for about 3 to 5 days. The conversation has to look like this. If it's just a good morning text or like a how was your day text, that's lame. That's not the kind of conversation I want. You got to be able to banter. And I didn't say this to them. Like, this was just all my own boundaries. And if they didn't show up and act like that, and I gave it to them and they still couldn't meet me there, I was like, well, you're out, you're out, you're out. And it just like weeded through everybody so easily.
Yeah.
And then you go on a date and it's the same thing. You're like, I like being spoken to this way. If someone isn't able to laugh with me, if someone doesn't like my dead dog jokes, like all of those things, then I'm like, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. I don't have time for it. And again, it just like, it made it easier. I think that's what a lot of people don't do when they're dating for a long time. Like, I had friends that were on dating apps for like 8 to 10 years.
Yep.
I was on a dating app for less than a year, and I met my now partner. You want to hear a crazy story?
Yes.
I said to myself, I'm done. I'm exhausted. I'm getting off this stupid thing. And I had tried all of them, but I was on, I think the last one I was on was Bumble.
Oh.
And so Bumble had, I guess it still has it, this feature where I was using the free version of everything. You could pay to see everybody that liked your profile.
Oh yes, I've done that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was like, I'm done. I'm getting off this. I'm going to pay for 7 days. That's it. 7 days. I'm going to go through these people. If not, if I don't match with one of these or I don't connect with them, then I'm just going to have to meet them on the street somewhere or in the food store. And that was my mindset. And I went through and I saw my partner now, Phil. I saw the last name. I messaged him. because I knew that last name, and I was like, we went to elementary school together. And
Oh my
he's like,
God.
he's like, no, I would have remembered you. And I was like, good line. But you have a brother named this, another brother named this. You went to this school, this school. And he was like, no freaking way. And we just boom, 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 started talking. We didn't realize, I mean, even though we went to elementary school, middle school, and high school together, we were
Oh,
different
wow.
grades. I didn't realize his parents lived 2 roads away from my parents.
Oh my God. Damn, that is the coolest story I've ever heard.
So cool. So I set, and like, they're all boundaries. And that's why I tell people, the clearer you get, the more
Yes.
specific you get, the easier it is to find your person, the easier it is to have the people in your life, because you're clear as day on what you want.
Hmm.
And then you just seem to look past and just go, not for me. It's not even a reaction anymore. You're just like, you're not for me. You're not for me. You're not for
Oh my
me.
gosh. No, yes, that makes sense. I've been single for like 2.5 years. I've been on the apps like on and off. But the last two people that I've like clicked with has been in person, because for some reason that just seems to work better for me.
Yeah.
I don't know why that is. Apps Apps, I don't know. Off topic, apps freak me out because one, people don't look how they look in person, and it freaks. I'm like, what just happened? I'm like, why do I feel like your profile looks like Brad Pitt, and then I've showed up, and you're not Brad Pitt. You're like average Joe, which is fine. Why can't you just post average Joe? What's going on? But
Also, the pictures they post are so stupid. You're kind of like, why are you putting group photos and not identifying who you are?
uh,
Why are you posting photos with other women and like
yes.
you're
Why do
trying to date women? It's just like, yeah,
It's
they
so
don't think it through.
silly. It's like this game thing. Oh, if I post pictures that I'm with other women, it's gonna make women want me more. No, the healthy ones, no. The healthy ones are gonna see that and be like, absolute jack off. See you, bye. You know
Yeah,
what I
no.
mean? Yeah, they're like, no, no thanks. But no, but being intentional is key. I think that's something where I personally definitely can like improve on. I'm not as intentional with my dating. I have my needs and my wants and like my list or whatever that I want and that I look for, and then I pick up on like the red flags, and I know I'm like, oh, I've done this before. I'm not doing this again.
Yeah.
And so it's easier for me to weed them out for sure. But at the same time, if I were to, the way that you explained it is so good. The more intentional you get behind what you want, and even the behavior that you want and what you don't want, is key. And then you said something else that was interesting too. You said that if I'm giving them like what I need, right? If you model to them, hey, this is what I need, and you're not getting it back, that's like a clear-cut indicator of like, okay, well,
So obvious. Yeah,
yeah,
it's so, because I'm like, I just want to banter about funny things all day. I don't like this unless it's on the phone. I don't want to have to
yeah,
text every morning and get a good morning, and then I have to be like, good morning, and then that's the only thing we talk about all
no, that's
day.
lame. Yeah, no,
That's not a
absolutely not.
conversation. And you're not my boyfriend. We're
Yeah,
trying to get to know each other. And I don't want to, Q&A session. I just want to like shoot the shit with you.
yeah, yes,
So, yeah, so if that didn't naturally flow, I mean, luckily Phil and myself had a ton in common
yeah,
that we just kind of were able to not shut up. But with other people that I genuinely connected with and dated for a small period of time, we just bantered. We made jokes. It was about TV shows or something, whatever in our
yeah.
day. Like, guess what I saw today? And that's what I wanted. So it was so embarrassing though sometimes, because I'd send a text to people and they would not answer, or it would be 5 hours later they're
Yeah.
answering and they're like, oh, haha.
Frustrating when you don't get the same energy back. But like, I've been uh what's the word I'm looking for? I've been not the best at this, but like if I don't get what I want back from the other person, I don't know why. I sit back and go, maybe they'll figure it out. Maybe I was like, guys are a little dumb sometimes. Maybe he's just slow. But that doesn't pan out. I think there's a lot in like hoping and wishing that the other person's going to show up how you want them to show up, and they can't. If you don't communicate and you don't show it and they don't, then they're probably not going to.
Yeah, I started cutting things off, and I'm kind. So I wasn't
Yeah.
like, yeah, I don't want to go out with you, or I don't want to go on a date. I was just always like, hey, listen, I don't feel like we're aligned, and
Mm.
it was really fun hanging out with you the other night. Good luck, with whoever
Yeah.
you take out next, whatever I said. And like some of them remained connected with me and friendly because we had similar interests like professionally. So I was
Mm.
like, no harm, no foul. Like, you
Yeah.
do some sort of similar line of work, then we can kind of like maintain, I don't know, social media connection. But yeah, I mean, it's just like you start to value your time more, I feel like, when you are able to realize I'm worth this because I give this.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's what helped me the most, because I think people who struggle, or people who with childhood trauma, or people who have come out of bad relationships tend to believe they're not getting it because there's something wrong with them, or they're
Mhm.
doing something wrong, or they're not deserving of it. And the reality is like when you try to focus on, am I worth it? Do I deserve it? How do I get it? You really lose yourself because you're
Yeah.
not thinking about you, you're thinking about them outside of you. But if you think about, what do I give?
Mm.
I deserve to get that, or something similar.
Yeah.
Then you're more in control and you're more empowered, and you're like, yes, like it's easy to validate that. Yes, I deserve that. And then it's like, I'm worth it because
Mhm.
I'm awesome and I give it to you. So
That's I like the way you said that. I have a okay, so I have a tricky one for you because, and I don't know how you're going to answer this one. So what if someone's like that, right? Where normally they're like, I'm not speaking on experience. Normally they're very much like, hey, I'm deserving of X, Y, and Z, and they can cut people off, like, whatever. But then why is it that there's going to be like that one person where suddenly all that just kind of goes out the window and you're like, what the absolute hell am I doing? That's something that I know I've dealt with, and then that I've seen a lot happen too, is you're like this kind of normal healthy person, and then there's one person shows up and you're like, oh no, it's all the healthiness is gone. What's happened?
you're probably connected to something that is rather toxic,
Mm.
that has you sacrificing or abandoning all of those things.
Yeah, yeah.
And typically, I would say, again, generally speaking, but a lot of the people I work with that really struggle with people pleasing
Mm.
tend to do that. I know there have been times where I thought I had all of my ducks in a row mentally, and I was
Yeah.
like, I got it. I've worked on myself a long time. I was single. I got this figured out. And then I end up in the most toxic situation ever. And I'm like,
Yeah.
how the fuck did I end up here again? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
but I realized there was something still operating inside of me. And for me, and this, I'm see-through. I tell everything to everybody, totally transparent. So like for me, my mom wasn't always able to provide for me like the emotional support that I
Mm.
wanted and needed, but she was great at like doing things, fixing things, or like a transactional type of interaction, often with gift buying or like finances.
Yeah.
And my dad, he just like was often checked out. Like he wasn't really verbally expressive about feelings. I had to
Mm.
beg him to say I looked pretty. And he was often feeding me sarcasm. So
Mm.
take that combo, right? When I started dating people and I ended up in a lot of different toxic situations, I seemingly, and I don't know, like consciously at the time, I didn't know why I was leaning towards this, but I wanted a wealthy man, straight up. I don't
Mm.
know why. And and I realized later, like long after these were over, because I was so used to having an emotionally absentee father
Mm.
and a financially, supportive mother, that I leaned into men who were like emotionally immature and had a lot of money.
Damn.
because all of my relationships just at that point were like these transactional things. I felt like I was important, but it was really this mask that I was like kind of like arm candy, if you
Mm.
will. I felt important that I could be like, they're taking me on vacation on the third date, when really I was going somewhere and being abused in so many different ways, but not telling anyone about it. Because again, for me, it was like, well, this is normal.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes
So I think that when you're in situations like that, and again, what was operating inside of me because of my childhood was like, what dad said went, even though dad didn't say too much. And so I aimed to please him, and my mom modeled that. My mom was always like, your dad's upset, go make him happy. Go
Mm.
apologize to him. I didn't do anything. I don't care. Go fix it. So when I would be with these men in power, I was pleasing and appeasing and just acquiescing to everything that they wanted or needed. If they had a complaint about the way I dressed, I changed it. If they made a comment about how I worked out, I asked them how they wanted me to work out, and I started working out. Like, I had no identity other than what they told me I was. And that just was like this Molotov cocktail of my childhood and the way my parents interacted, the way they spoke to me, and the way what they modeled to me.
Wow. Yeah, I think a lot of people need to start paying, this is a very general comment, but I think a lot of people need to start paying attention to how their parents interacted when they were young and how
Yeah,
that's now affecting their dynamics and their relationships generally. Because I think it even applies to friendships as well. I don't think it just applies to
absolutely.
romantic relationships. I'll notice for a long time I had friendships that were highly, highly codependent, where they
Mm.
almost treated me like I was a partner and not a friend. And then the more I started healing that codependency within me, my friendships changed to people who were more secure and independent on their own. And it was a learning curve for me because at first I was like, oh no, do they not want to be my friend? What's happening? They're not texting me 24/7. They're not picking up the phone and calling me all the time. What's going on? And so I had to learn, hey, that's not typically a very healthy friendship, right? That's acting like a partner. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
It applies to, I mean, all of our relationships. People will often, because I'll gear a lot of my content towards partners.
Mm,
And now sometimes I'll be like, and friends and
yeah.
family and whatever. But for me, it's just like all the same,
Yeah.
because one relationship in your life is really all relationships in your life. Like,
Mm,
you're the common denominator in all of them.
yes. Yes, that's very, very true. I think a lot of people neglect to take that accountability too. I think they think that, oh, what is it's the world. It's all these people that I'm meeting. It's like, no, if you're the common denominator in these situations, it's your life. Then if you again, like kind of circling back to the beginning, if you want to change how you're showing, change your relationships, you got to change how you're showing up and what you or how you're operating from mentally and emotionally.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I think a lot of people know they have to take accountability, and it's uncomfortable because
Yeah.
what comes with accountability is the recognition that you're going to have to do something different. And
Yeah.
so if you're not ready to do something different, you won't. You'll deflect and project and just like avoid having to own whatever it is that you're doing. And I mean, it's all connected.
Yeah, it is. All of it is connect the dots. Yeah.
Exactly.
If anyone resonated with your story or anything that you talked about, what would be the advice that you give them? What would you say to them?
I mean, which part of my story can you just
Anything.
Well, I would say if you resonate with like the dating stuff, right? Like going from trying to navigate, figuring out what you want, what you value, and you're desiring a healthy relationship. Like, that was like for me the ultimate prize when I was a kid. Like, that's all I really wanted, was to be in a relationship, and I could not figure it out to save my life. So I think if you resonated with like you've been through something bad, whether that was abuse or had any type of trauma, even from childhood, and you're wanting a partner or a friendship to be healthier, then what I can tell you is like, A, it's possible. So don't think for 1 second, oh, I've been struggling for 5 years, Amy, or I've been single for 8 years. Who cares? The timeline really doesn't matter at the end of the day. And the only one keeping score and track of that time is you. Nobody knows until I tell them that I was single intentionally for 6 years. And then just randomly one day was like, sure, I guess I'll start dating. And adamantly was like, never going on a dating app. And then was like, sure, I'll go on a dating app. You can change your mind. And that's the other piece of advice I want to give them. At any point in time, if at some point you were like, yeah, this guy's really great, or this girl's really great, or whoever they are that you're talking to, if they're wonderful, or they felt wonderful 24 hours ago before you heard me talk, and now you're like, well, what do I do? Like, I told them yes to a date tomorrow. You can say no. That's okay. And you don't have to be mean. Like, I think that's another piece of this puzzle is people think that when they want to decline or they want to say no, or they want to uphold a boundary, or they want to change their mind, that they're mean or they're bitchy or they're rude. I'm not to toot my own horn, but that's one of the compliments I get from people is you're so firm, but you're just so kind and like compassionate and empathetic about everything you say. How do you have that combo? Well, I'm just honest. So I don't try to like script myself in those moments. Even when I was dating, I was just like, listen, this is really uncomfortable. I know I was going to meet you in 4 hours, but I don't really want to anymore. So just be yourself. That's the third piece of advice I'll give them is it's okay to change your mind. Stop keeping scores. Stop timing yourself. It's none of it matters. I'm literally 38 and still figuring certain things out in my life, you know? So age, it's just a number. That timeline is just a number, and it means nothing to anybody.
Thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it. Do you want to tell people how they can find you on like your platforms?
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for having me. First off, they can find me on Instagram and TikTok, which is at Amy the Life Coach, on Twitter at Amy the Life Coach, or they can go straight to my website, which is amyfiedler.com, or listen to my podcast, Connect the Dots Bitch, on Apple or Spotify.